Elvis Presley is denied access to an elevator in a hotel he owns. His response became legendary. The rain came down hard across downtown Memphis on the evening of March 15, 1974. When Elvis Presley pulled up to the International Hotel in his modest rental car, he had deliberately chosen the plain sedan over his usual Cadillac fleet because tonight would be different. Tonight he wanted to visit his own hotel completely incognito. The International Hotel Memphis had been one of his most successful business ventures, a luxury establishment that had opened just 2 years earlier, and had quickly become the crown jewel of Memphis hospitality. But Elvis had been hearing whispers about problems with staff attitudes, complaints about service, and rumors that some employees were treating guests poorly based on their appearance or perceived social status. As the king of rock and roll stepped out into the stormy night, he looked nothing like the glittering performer millions knew and loved. Gone were the jeweled jumpsuits and perfectly styled hair. Instead, he wore a simple dark jacket, faded jeans, and a baseball cap pulled low over his eyes. His famous sideburns were hidden beneath the cap, and he had deliberately avoided shaving that morning, giving him a scruffy, everyday appearance. To anyone who didn't look closely, he appeared to be just another working-class man seeking shelter from the storm. This was exactly the look he wanted. He wanted to experience his own hotel the way an ordinary guest would. To see firsthand how his staff treated people when they thought no one important was watching. Elvis had always prided himself on creating businesses that reflected his values of treating everyone with dignity and respect, regardless of their background or appearance. His mother, Gladys, had raised him to believe that every person deserved kindness. And he had tried to instill that philosophy in all his ventures. But lately, he had been receiving letters from guests complaining about being judged or mistreated by hotel staff, and these reports troubled him deeply. Tonight, he was determined to discover the truth for himself, even if it meant temporarily abandoning the comfort and recognition that came with his fame. If you're enjoying this incredible story about Elvis and his legendary response, please take a moment to subscribe to our channel and give this video a thumbs up. Your support means everything to us and helps us continue bringing you these amazing true stories. Thank you for being part of our community. As Elvis approached the hotel's elegant entrance, he could see through the floor-to-ceiling windows that the lobby was bustling with activity. Well-dressed guests were checking both in and out. The restaurant was full of diners, and everything appeared to be running smoothly. The International Hotel Memphis was indeed a beautiful establishment. Marble floors, crystal chandeliers, and tasteful artwork adorned every corner. Elvis felt a surge of pride as he remembered the vision he had shared with his architect and interior designer, wanting to create a place that combined Southern hospitality with world-class luxury. The doorman, a young man named Marcus, whom Elvis didn't recognize, glanced at him briefly as he entered but didn't offer any assistance or greeting. This was already a small red flag. Elvis had specifically trained his staff to warmly welcome every guest, regardless of appearance. But he said nothing, simply nodding politely and making his way across the marble lobby toward the bank of elevators that would take him to the penthouse suite he maintained for his personal use. As Elvis waited for the elevator, he observed the interactions happening around him. He watched as the front desk staff greeted well-dressed guests with bright smiles and extensive assistance, while giving much more perfunctory service to those who appeared to be ordinary travelers or business people. This pattern was exactly what he had feared he might discover, and it made his heart heavy to see his values being ignored in his own establishment. When the elevator finally arrived, Elvis stepped forward to board it along with several other guests, but just as he was about to enter, a hand shot out, blocking his path. The hand belonged to Thomas Richardson, the hotel's assistant manager, a well-dressed man in his 40s who had been hired 6 months earlier and whom Elvis had never met personally. "Excuse me, sir," Richardson said in a tone that was polite but firm, "but this elevator is reserved for hotel guests only. I'm going to have to ask you to use the service elevator around the corner." Elvis looked up, genuinely confused. "I am a hotel guest," he said quietly. His voice was calm, despite the growing tension he felt inside. Richardson looked him up and down skeptically, taking in the worn jeans, the casual jacket, and the baseball cap. "Sir, I'm going to need to see your room key or registration confirmation. This is a luxury establishment, and we have certain standards we need to maintain." The other guests in the elevator, who were clearly affluent based on their clothing and jewelry, watched the exchange with a mixture of curiosity and discomfort. Elvis could see that some of them seemed embarrassed by the assistant manager's behavior, while others appeared to approve of what they perceived as maintaining exclusivity. "I don't have a room key with me at the moment," Elvis answered honestly. The truth was that he used a special access code for his penthouse suite, and he had left his wallet with his identification in his other jacket. "But I can assure you, I belong here." Richardson's expression hardened. "Sir, I'm going to have to insist that you either provide proof of your guest status, or use the appropriate elevator. We cannot allow non-guests to use our main elevators. It's a matter of security and guest comfort." Elvis felt a familiar flash of temper that he usually kept carefully controlled, but he forced himself to remain calm. This was exactly the kind of discrimination he had come to investigate, and he was seeing it firsthand. Part of him wanted to reveal his identity immediately and put Richardson in his place, but a wiser part of him realized that this was a teaching moment, not just for Richardson, but for all the guests who were witnessing this interaction. "I understand you're trying to do your job," Elvis said, his voice remaining steady and respectful, "but I'm curious. What exactly about my appearance makes you think I don't belong here?" Richardson shifted uncomfortably, clearly not expecting the question. "Well, sir, it's not about your appearance per se, it's about our policies and—" "No," Elvis interrupted gently, but firmly. "Let's be honest about what's happening here. You looked at my clothes, at the way I'm dressed, and you made a judgment about whether I deserve the same treatment as these other folks. Isn't that right?" The elevator had grown completely silent. Even the other guests were now paying close attention to this unexpected confrontation. Richardson glanced around nervously, realizing that the situation was spiraling beyond his control. "Sir, I'm simply following hotel policy," Richardson insisted, though his voice lacked conviction. Elvis nodded thoughtfully. "I see, and whose policy is that exactly? Who decided that a person's worth should be measured by their clothing?" At this point, some of the other guests began to speak. An elderly woman in an expensive fur coat said, "Young man, you're being unnecessarily harsh. Can't you see this gentleman is perfectly respectable?" A businessman in a three-piece suit added, "This is getting ridiculous. We're all going to be late for our appointments." But Elvis held up his hand gently, asking for patience. "Actually, I appreciate what you're trying to do, but this is important. Mr. Richardson here is about to learn something valuable, and so are the rest of us." Richardson was now looking increasingly uncomfortable and confused. "Sir, I don't understand what you're trying to. Let me tell you a story," Elvis said, settling back against the wall as if he had all the time in the world. "When I was a boy, my mum used to clean houses for wealthy families. She'd get all dressed up in her one good dress, but sometimes she'd have to run errands afterward, while still wearing her cleaning clothes. She told me about how differently people treated her, depending on what she was wearing. The same woman, the same kind heart, the same intelligence, but people would either respect her or dismiss her based on whether she was in her Sunday best, or her work clothes." The elevator was now completely silent, except for Elvis's soft southern drawl. Even Richardson had stopped protesting and was listening intently. "Now my mama taught me that every person you meet is fighting a battle you know nothing about. That businessman over there in the nice suit? Maybe he's on his way to the hospital to see a sick relative. That lady in the beautiful dress? Maybe she's celebrating something wonderful. Or maybe she's trying to put on a brave face during the worst day of her life. And me, standing here in my work clothes. Well, maybe I'm exactly where I'm supposed to be. Learning exactly what I need to learn." Elvis paused, letting his words sink in before continuing. "The thing is, Mr. Richardson, true hospitality isn't about serving only the people who look like they can afford it. True hospitality is about treating every human being with dignity and respect, because you never know who you're really talking to. Richardson was now looking genuinely troubled, as if he was beginning to understand he had made a serious error in judgment. "Sir, I think maybe I was too hasty in my—" "Oh, you weren't too hasty," Elvis said with a slight smile. "You were being exactly who you are. The question is that who you want to be?" At this moment, the elevator doors opened on the ground floor, and several hotel staff members, including the general manager, James Morrison, rushed toward them. Morrison had been alerted by other employees who had witnessed the commotion and recognized Elvis despite his disguise. "Mr. Presley," Morrison exclaimed, his face pale with embarrassment and concern. "Sir, I had no idea you were in the building. Please, let me apologize for any inconvenience." But Elvis held up his hand again, stopping Morrison mid-sentence. "Actually, James, this has been very enlightening. Mr. Richardson here has just given me exactly the information I came looking for." Richardson's face had gone white as the reality of the situation crashed over him. "Mr. Presley, you own this hotel?" "I do," Elvis said simply. "But more importantly, I'm a human being who was just treated poorly because of how I'm dressed. And if that's how you treat me, how do you think you're treating other guests who might not have the ability to complain to the owner?" The gathered staff members and guests watched in fascination as Elvis continued. His voice never rising, but carrying an unmistakable authority. "See, here's what I think happened tonight, Mr. Richardson. I think you saw someone who didn't meet your expectations of what a hotel guest should look like, and you decided to exercise a little power. Maybe you were having a bad day, or maybe you've been taught that appearances matter more than character. But whatever the reason, you forgot the most important rule of hospitality. Treat everyone like they might be the most important person you'll ever meet." Richardson looked as if he might faint. "Mr. Presley, I am so sorry. I had no idea. Please, let me explain." "Actually," Elvis said, his tone becoming warmer, "I think you've already explained it perfectly. You've shown me exactly what I needed to see. The question now is, what are we going to do about it?" Morrison started to speak, clearly intending to fire Richardson on the spot, but Elvis stopped him with a look. "Mr. Richardson," Elvis continued, "I'm going to give you a choice. You can see this as the end of your career here, or you can see it as the beginning of a better understanding of what hospitality really means. What's it going to be?" Richardson was clearly struggling with emotions, embarrassment, fear, confusion, and perhaps the beginning of genuine understanding. "Sir, I want to learn. I want to improve." Elvis nodded slowly. "Good. Because here is what will happen. For the next month, you will work every position in this hotel. You are going to be a doorman, a bellhop, a housekeeper, and a server in the restaurant. You are going to see this place from the perspective of every worker here, and every guest who walks through those doors. And at the end of that month, if you can honestly tell me that you understand what true hospitality means, we will talk about your future here." The crowd that had gathered was stunned by Elvis's response. They had expected anger, immediate firing, or perhaps even public humiliation. Instead, they were witnessing something far more powerful, a lesson in leadership and human dignity. "But here is the most important thing," Elvis continued. "Starting tomorrow, this hotel will implement a new policy. Every staff member is going to spend time working with local community organizations, homeless shelters, and food banks. Because if we are going to be in the hospitality business, we need to understand what it means to truly serve others, especially those who might not be able to give us anything in return." The elderly woman in a fur coat spoke up. "Mr. Presley, that is the most remarkable thing that I have ever seen. You could have humiliated this young man, but instead you are giving him a chance at growth." Elvis turned to her with a kind smile. "Mom, my mom always said that everyone deserves a second chance to do better. Besides, Mr. Richardson is going to become one of my best employees, because he will understand hospitality in a way that cannot be taught from any manual. Over the following weeks, Richardson's transformation was remarkable. He threw himself into his new assignments with enthusiasm, working every job in the hotel, and volunteering at community organizations throughout Memphis. The experience of serving others, especially those less fortunate, gave him a perspective he never had before. More importantly, his story became legendary throughout the hotel industry. Other hotels began implementing similar programs, requiring their management staff to work various positions and spend time in community service. The International Hotel Program, as it became known, was adopted by hospitality schools and hotel chains across the country. Richardson himself became one of Elvis's most trusted managers, eventually being promoted to general manager of another hotel within the chain. But he never forgot the lesson he learned that rainy night in March. He would often tell new employees about the evening when he almost denied the hotel's owner access to an elevator, and how that mistake became the most important learning experience of his career. Years later, Richardson would speak at hospitality conferences about the importance of treating every person with dignity and respect. He would always end his presentations with the same message: "You never know who you are talking to. And more importantly, it should not matter. Every person deserves to be treated with kindness and respect, not because of who they might be, but because of who they are. Fellow human beings deserving dignity." The story of that night spread throughout Memphis and beyond, becoming part of Elvis Presley's legacy, not as a performer, but as a man who used his power and influence to teach important lessons about humanity and compassion. The guests who witnessed the exchange that night often told the story to friends and family, marveling not at Elvis's fame or wealth, but at his wisdom and grace under pressure. The Memphis Hotel became known not just for its luxury amenities, but for its exceptional staff training and commitment to genuine hospitality. The hotel's reputation for treating every guest with equal respect, regardless of their appearance or background, became a model in the industry. Elvis continued to make surprise visits to his hotels and other businesses throughout his life, sometimes in disguise and sometimes not, but always watching for opportunities to reinforce the values he held dear. He believed that true success was not measured in record sales or box office receipts, but in the positive impact one could have on other people's lives. The elevator incident became one of the most retold stories in Memphis hospitality circles, not just because of its famous protagonist, but because of the profound lesson it held. In a world where people are often judged by their appearance, wealth, or status, Elvis Presley demonstrated that true leadership means creating opportunities for growth and understanding, rather than simply exercising power. Mr. Richardson kept a framed copy of Elvis's words in his office throughout his career. True hospitality isn't about serving only people who look like they can afford it. True hospitality is about treating every human being with dignity and respect, because you never know who you are really talking to. Perhaps the most lasting impact of that night was the ripple effect it created throughout the hospitality industry and beyond. Countless employees learned to see their work not just as a job, but as an opportunity for making a positive difference in people's lives. Hotels began training their staff to recognize that their role was not to judge or exclude, but to welcome and to serve. The story also resonated with guests and customers in other industries, reminding them of their own power to treat service workers with respect and kindness. Many people who heard the story began to examine their own behavior, asking themselves whether they were guilty of the same judgment that had initially motivated Mr. Richardson's actions. In the end, what made Elvis's response truly legendary was not his wealth or his fame. It was his choice to respond to discrimination and poor treatment with compassion, wisdom, and an opportunity for growth. He could have used his power to punish or humiliate, but instead he chose to uplift and educate. This approach reflected the values that Elvis had learned from his mother and that had guided him throughout his life, that every person has worth and potential, that mistakes can become opportunities for growth, and that true leadership means helping others become their best selves. The legacy of that rainy night in Memphis continues to inspire people in the hospitality industry and beyond, serving as a reminder that how we treat others reveals our true character, especially when we think no one important is watching. sometimes the most powerful response to poor treatment is not anger or revenge, but the offer of a second chance and the opportunity to grow and learn. This incredible story shows us the power of responding to negativity with compassion and wisdom. If you were moved by Elvis's legendary response and the lessons it teaches about treating everyone with dignity, please remember to subscribe to our channel and give this video a thumbs up. Share this story with someone who needs to hear it now. What do you think of Elvis's approach to this situation? Let us know in the comments below, and be sure to hit that notification bell so you never miss our inspiring content.